Well, for the audience, we will take some audience questions near the end of tonight's forum. These next three questions have been posed by members of the University of Wisconsin-Baraboo Student Government Association. And the first question goes to David Moore, and you'll both have an opportunity to answer both of these questions. The question is, what do you think the state legislature should do to address the needs of residents who are without health insurance, especially in light of recent reports that the cost for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act exchange is expected to rise by double digits next year?
Yeah, the health insurance crisis continues to grow worse. On a national level and in the state level, the party politics will argue back and forth over who's at fault. Is it Republicans or is it Democrats? There's enough blame to go around to both parties. And I would say the major point of blame is this, that we're not working to address the need and fix the problem. Here in Wisconsin, Governor Walker made a decision not to accept the Medicaid money. It's been a real point of contention between the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, and the legislature. We can go back and we can revisit those things over and over and over again, but even that is not going to address the basic problem, which is the need for health care. For most of us, health care we look for from our employment. Here in this district, we're lagging behind economically. If we can have better jobs, if we can have the availability of more workplaces that offer health insurance benefits, I think that's going to go a long ways towards meeting the needs without having to bring government even into the equation. It's famously been said, the worst thing you could ever hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That's not always true. Sometimes the government needs to help. And so there needs to be a reasonable understanding of the place for governmental help. There needs to be a reasonable understanding for the way you do it. We're not going to solve that problem in a term. We're not going to solve that problem with a 3-minute soundbite. But I will tell you this, if we work together at solving the problem and quit working at trying to place blame on the other side, that'll get us a lot farther down the road.
The Affordable Care Act, boy, on a national level, that sure caused a lot of fun discussions, hasn't it? But I really support that. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it is just that, a step. If I had my way, we'd have a single-payer health insurance system, and we would all have health care. I think universal health care is almost a right of every citizen in our nation. And I think that partially because I served a whole lot of students of special needs, and students who were, our school district has over 50% free and reduced lunch students. It's pretty tough to afford health insurance when you're there, and yet that's the most important thing that we could give our young children in order to have them live a successful life. But let me answer the question very specifically to those students of you that are here. I think one of the commonly misunderstood facts about the Affordable Care Act is that it's subsidized, that you get a tax credit for your insurance premiums, and those tax credits will pay the difference between whatever your care is. It may cost $425 a month for your insurance, but you may only have to pay $75. And while your insurance goes up that much, your cost does not go up. You say, how do I afford that? How does the government afford that? Doesn't that raise federal taxes? No, part of the deal was an $80 billion sum of money that President Obama negotiated with the pharmaceutical companies because he agreed not to negotiate pharmaceutical costs. I kind of wish he hadn't agreed that. But that is paid for by the $80 billion that he got from the pharmaceutical companies. The cost will go up, but it's going to come out of that pile and that kitty of money that President Obama negotiated, and you won't pay anymore.
I also should mention that if either of the candidates wants me to repeat a question, I'd be happy to do so after the other candidate answers. This next question is for Dave Considine. What would the What should the state's priority be in terms of funding when it comes to K through 12 education, community colleges, and universities?
Great question. As a public school teacher who really feels like the public schools in our state have done an excellent job, and since the advent, especially of when I got in office, and adding more and more private vouchers and stealing money from our public school students, Portage District lost $200,000 the minute we did that, and one student who was not in public school enrolled in a private school. The rest of those students were already in a private school. We need to stop subsidizing people who choose private schools. They're wonderful. They're great schools. But we can't afford two public school systems in the state of Wisconsin. And so the first thing I would do is roll back all of the vouchers back to the original ones. If I could, I'd roll back the ones in Milwaukee and Racine and Kenosha. But I think they've been institutionalized for so long that that's going to be really difficult, and the Milwaukee public school system couldn't possibly absorb all those students. But I would roll back the vouchers. Secondly, I would fund higher education by rolling back the manufacturers and agricultural tax credit. You read about that this summer. 0.1%, the top 0.1% of people in the state of Wisconsin received 76% of that. Supposedly that's supposed to increase jobs. If it had, why is Wisconsin lagging behind all of our neighboring states in job production? And it is. We're behind all of the rest of the Midwest. I would take that $276 million per year, which almost equals the amount that we cut the UW system, and I'd plow it right into the UW system. And oh, by the way, cutting the UW system, that was really bright. We lost $1.5 million within 2 days of research that left our state and went somewhere else. That saved a lot of money.
Well, first of all, if the question is the priority of funding K through 12 and the UW system, which one should get funded first, I think you look at it as a package. I think both need to be funded equally, in equal importance. If the question is the priority of funding these versus other things, obviously these are highest or close to highest of the list of priorities. I'm a little surprised to hear my opponent refer in such terms as stealing money for the voucher system. You know, the voucher system this year is I believe it's about 3,000 students and change, maybe 3,300 at the most, something like that. Total of about $248 million. That's out of an $11.1 million that this public education system gets. So $248 million sounds like a lot of money, but out of $11.1 billion, it's pretty representative. The idea of vouchers is based on the idea of parental choice. It's called the parental choice program. And the idea is parents have a right to choose where to send their kids. If they think that a school meets the needs of their particular child better, they should be able to send their kids there. And because the tax money is supposed to be there to educate the children, then that money should go along with the student. So I'm a little taken aback by the idea of this is somehow stealing. This is not stealing. This is the money being used the way it's supposed to be for the children to be educated. As far as the UW system and the cuts, I personally think that the cuts have probably been a little deeper than they needed to be. I wasn't in the legislature at the time, so I can't say what all negotiations happened and what was all the different things said in committee meetings and so forth, but I can say this. When it comes to universities and the university system, clearly this is more than just educational. This is economical. This is an economic decision. And so the cuts and the funding have to be balanced with the needs of the state. So the priority has to be that these things get funded to their needs, but at the same time we have to be able to do the rest of the stuff that the state needs as well.
And this next question is for David Moore. What would be your #1 priority in office after election if you were to win this race?
Excuse me, could you ask Mr. Moore to hold the microphone a little closer to his... Good.
Am I not loud enough? I got to tell you, that's a first for me. Of course, being a pastor, having someone sit there with a time card and tell me it's time to stop, that's also a little weird. I hope nobody in my church decides to try that on Sunday. It won't work. Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry. What?
Yes.
First priority, first thing when I get in office? Okay.
Exactly.
You know, that's a pretty common question that gets asked for candidates. I'm sure Dave was asked that last time and so forth. And I know when I was running for the county board here in Sauk County, that was a question people would ask pretty often. And when you're first running for office, you have all these ideas of things that you want to do, things you want to accomplish. And when you get there, you realize that those are things you can work on and things you need to do. But you also understand, well, on the county board level, there's another 30 other people you have to deal with. And in the legislature, there's another 98 people you have to deal with, plus the other side of the House, or the Senate, and then you have the governor's office. So my own personal priority, as far as what I think needs to be addressed first, would be transportation funding. As I've gone around the district, as I've gone to town board meetings and talked with people, transportation funding is definitely highest on my priority list. And I think that the way to address that is with, I think we already have enough tax money coming in to address it. The problem is we're spending it incorrectly. I think we've got to be prioritizing our roads, our funding of counties and towns for their roads especially. I think we've got to be prioritizing road projects. And once we have met the short term through prioritized budgets, I think we look at a long-term solution with something similar to a toll system or something like that. I don't think there's anything you should take off the table, except I think the last thing on the table ought to be taxes. Taxes ought to be uniform, taxes ought to be as small as possible. And some of the ideas that I've heard espoused, and I'm sure my opponent is going to espouse the idea he mentioned the other day at the State Journal office, that of raising a tax on farmers for their red-dyed diesel. And I think that's a terrible idea, simply put, and it's not just Democrats that are on that. There's some Republicans that think that that's good too, so it's not just picking on Democrats. I think that when you start raising taxes, what you've said is we're spending all the money we want to on all the things we want to, and the last thing we want to do is spend money on roads. So we have to raise taxes to spend more money on roads. And I think that shows a real improperly placed priority. So for me, my priority would be working on the transportation funding.
And same question for you, Dave.
First of all, let me acknowledge that I get a little excited up here when I'm doing that, a little intense. So I'm going to try to back off just a little bit. I don't know if you noticed that in my last several answers, but I do tend to get that way. And I apologize for that. I just wanted to go back to the last question just for a second. We already have choice in our public schools. Parents can choose to send their kids to any public school around them at no cost. District pays for it. They share them back and forth. We have parental choice. We don't need private schools. Billions of dollars have come into this state, and I watched those billions of dollars come and plead in front of the educational committee for those kind of monies to fund private vouchers. And I watch every public school represent themselves there and fight with that. We have choice. But priority legislatively, there's two ways of looking at that question. The first one is, what's your legislative priority? I think I made mine pretty clear. It's funding public education, and especially in public education, it's funding mental health. We need to take care of kids at a much younger age. We need to work out a way to get mental health clinics in the schools so that when schools are in trouble, when kids are in trouble, they can get help in the schools. But I think it's a bigger question than that. And you heard me in my opening really say what my number one priority is. My number one priority is to drive around this district, hold listening sessions, to have breakfast at Candy's restaurant in Merrimack and talk to the 10 guys shooting the breeze around the circle there and move from table to table. That's my number one priority as a legislator. It's to figure out what you, the district, are telling me you need done, and then to get it done.
You mentioned 30 seconds.